All right, welcome to this episode of Trojan Poetry. Again, Mr. Bronchi,
Yeah.
Chris is back with us.
Excited
Can't
to
get
be
enough.
here.
Yep, it is
get
a
enough.
new year.
New year, new poem.
Yeah,
New year,
that's
new
right.
poem. That's right, new attitude. All right, this one is by Christian Wiman. Now, in Trojan Poetry 59, we read a poem by Osip Mandelstam that Christian Wiman had translated. So if you haven't read that, that's an amazing poem.
That is intense.
Yeah.
That one is very intense.
So go back, Trojan Poetry 59, but this one's actually by Christian Wiman. So here we go. From a window. Incurable and unbelieving in any truth but the truth of grieving, I saw a tree inside a tree rise kaleidoscopically, as if the leaves had livelier ghosts. I pressed my face as close to the pane as I could get to watch that fitful, fluent spirit that seemed a single being undefined of countless beings of one mind, haul its strange cohesion beyond the limits of my vision, over the house heavenwards. Of course, I knew those leaves were birds. Of course, that old tree stood exactly as it had and would, but why should it seem fuller now? And though a man's mind might endow even a tree with some excess, or life to which a man seems witness, that life is not the life of men, and that is where the joy came in. I'm going to admit, that's hard to read.
Yeah, that's beefy.
It's interesting because, you have the rhyming couplets throughout, and I thought the last line kind of brought it together. The last couplet brought it together for me, the last two lines. That life is not the life of men, and that is where the joy came in. And when you get to the top and you look at the second line, any truth but the truth of grieving. So that really set the tone for me, because I thought this was a person who was sitting inside, their face pressed up against the glass, literally looking at this tree and having this vision of, I don't know, we can talk about what that is in a minute.
Yeah.
As he is grieving, so maybe his grief has driven him to this like hallucinatory state where he's seeing stuff, floating off into the wind. What did you think, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I was intrigued by a couple of aspects. One, I had that same image of someone like look out the window and kind of had this, maybe because we're looking at poetry, this like Emily Dickinson sort of, her writing at that desk overlooking the cemetery and those sorts of things with this grieving person. I was just utterly enjoying the choice of punctuation and also thoroughly confused by it. But I love the playfulness of these. Well, and playfulness is probably the wrong word there, but the sophistication of some of these long sentences split across multiple stanzas, but then paired with this beautiful last sentence that's the only really short sentence that there is, and that is where the joy came in. And some may even argue that is that really technically a sentence, but I think it's this beautiful way of playing with language that I think makes it, like you were saying, John, like hard to read, makes it a little bit easier to follow if you really are kind of looking for some of those punctuation breaks.
Yeah, and I might not have done it justice in the reading, and I'll be honest, I hadn't really even quite noticed that it was rhyming couplets as I was reading it, because I'm reading it to try to get to the end of a sentence,
right?
But then I'm caught up in the rhythm. So I really would like to look more at the structure of the rhythm and the rhyming and all that. But then ghosts and close don't rhyme, which is interesting because that's a near rhyme or a slant rhyme. Like the fact that they're ghosts, right? Of course they can't be close because they're not real,
right?
So that idea of that little split, and get and spirit don't quite, so I guess they're rhyming couplets for the most part, but then they're not quite. Maybe some of them.
They're close, but and it's funny you say that because I didn't even notice the sentences at all. I was just looking at the rhyme copy, and I was just looking at it that way. So. And as we were talking here, the leaves had livelier ghosts. I'm wondering if what this person is seeing is they're grieving and they're seeing the soul of the person, whoever it is that they lost, go heavenwards, because it does say, it flies limits of my vision over the house heavenwards, and that is where the joy came in, maybe because he realizes that this person that he's grieving is going to heaven, will have a better afterlife, something to that effect. John, what did you think?
See, now I hadn't thought of that. I had taken the literal, he's looking at a tree and the tree is full of birds, and the birds start to fly away. And when the birds start to fly away, it looks like a second tree within the tree. And then the leaves, which are really the birds, fly away. And that's the image in the first half. Right. And then the second, or the last 4 stanzas, or the middle of the 5th to last stanza, of course I knew those leaves were birds. Like, he builds up this kind of magical, mystical image, and then instantly knocks it down, and then tells us the facts. The leaves were birds. It was an old tree. But with the parentheses, I'm sorry.
No, yeah.
With the parentheses, why should it seem fuller now? Like, what has happened to turn the bird-filled tree into maybe a symbol, right, that somehow touches him spiritually or emotionally?
Well, I think what's interesting too, when you say, he goes back to the facts. Like, he doesn't just go back to the facts. Like, he overdoes it with the repetition of course, right? Like, well, of course it was this, of course, and that, to me, that really, it was, is kind of that turning point, or that, the linchpin, so to speak. Right. Again, coming off of a complete sentence, right? It starts a new sentence to do that.
In the middle of a stanza.
Exactly.
After 1, 2, 3, 3.5 stanzas of a sentence, right? So it's a shock all of a sudden.
Yep.
Yeah. Of course I knew the leaves were birds.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems and you're like, that's what he meant.
Okay. And I mean, I don't think I've ever seen kaleidoscope used as an adverb.
Okay.
That was really cool, just as a word choice there. I was like, whoa,
That's
kaleidoscopically.
$10 word right there.
I mean, I'm going to start using it now.
Right. And when going back to that, of course, it's like he's trying to convince himself.
Yes.
Of course, I'm not crazy, right?
Right.
I saw a tree. I saw the birds come off of it. And then when he says that life is not the life of men, he's talking about the tree.
Well, a man's mind might endow even a tree with some excess of life,
right? Which a man seems witness.
Right.
That life is not the life of men, and that is where the joy came in. So, what life is he talking about? The life of nature itself. The world will go on even after someone has gone, someone has left. I don't know. For some reason, that grieving really struck me at the beginning, and I guess that's kind of flavored my reading of the poem.
Sure.
Well,
I think it should.
But go back to that though, like, as we're talking about a sort of hopeful ending. I mean, just look at the very first word of the piece, though. Right? He starts by saying that this is incurable. So is anything better by the end?
Right.
Well, of course it is.
Right. It is. But it goes back to what you were saying about him almost trying to convince himself more than anything else.
Yeah. Well, so part of the story here is that I was trying to clear up before we started taping is that at some point recently, Christian Wiman was diagnosed with an incurable cancer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so, but when I was trying to figure out the timing, it seems like this poem was written before that. So it might be just a person like at a hospital looking out at, maybe somebody else is sick. Or, again, I couldn't get the timeline right, that it could be him thinking about himself.
Yeah.
Right. But either way, I think the ending, and that is where the joy came in, that search for something transcendent that has more life than what we know.
Right. Will carry us away.
That would fit nicely with this idea of the person grieving him or her own tragedy, and realizing that there is something else that isn't the life of men, and that's what makes him happy now, like kind of coming to terms with it.
Right.
I really like this poem a lot. I think there's, like you said, there's a lot more to think about and look at, even just the punctuation that you guys have mentioned. I want to read this a couple more times and pick out where the sentences begin and end.
Yeah, I mean, it does have the heavenwards, that mention of heaven, but not capitalized, but, it's an
moving
interesting...
towards heaven. It's not there yet.
Yeah, but it's not the actual place, right?
It's just going that direction.
It's the direction, not the concept.
And the strange cohesion dead center in the poem, right? The birds are hauling, countless beings of one mind hauling its strange cohesion, just like...
It's one being. That. It's like it's like an amoeba.
It's the kaleidoscope.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. There it is. Yeah.
Oh well, Happy New Year.
All right, thanks for watching. Please join the conversation in the comments on YouTube or on Twitter at Trojan Poetry DGN. Also, check out our website at trojanpoetrydgn.blogspot.com.